The 44th Grand Company is back from the Las Vegas Open with a 4-2 record. I had an undefeated day one for the first time in a major Warhammer event. Needless to say, I'm very proud of my spiky boys. For the last hurrah in Nephilim, I decided to bring Chaos Knights, but honestly, Chaos Suit might be more accurate. I had Abaddon for Chaos Space Marines, I had a Demon Patrol with 10 Flamers and their tax units of a Horror and a Herald, and then I had 8 War Dogs, 4 of which were Brigands, 2 Executioners, and 2 Stalkers. I had 4 Favored Knights. We got to get all the cool chaosy blessings. The Helm of the Dog's Boy had the Blessing of the Dark Master so that he was harder to hit. But to be fair, I think the only time he died, he just got vaporized. So it didn't help too much, but it could have. Another Brigand had Mark of the Dread Knight. An Executioner had Mirror of Fates for that sweet, sweet CP refund. And lastly, a Stalker had Warpborn Stalker, which seems a little fitting if you ask me. So let's jump into round 1 here. It was 93-49 versus Custodes. I took Banners, Ruthless Tyranny, and Warp Ritual. He deployed his 2 bike squads on the far flank, planning to Alpha Strike if he got first turn, or redeploy if he went second, because he has all those nifty little tricks. He did indeed get first, and then surprised me with his Shield Host's specific stratagem to let him have a pre-game move for that front biker squad. I was a little worried about that when he zipped both of them forward, with obviously the pre-game move guy being just right up into me. They shot their rockets at one of the knights. I rotated my ion shields, or diabolic bulwark, as it's called for the Chaos Boys. I managed to bounce one of the shots with a 4, exactly a 4, so good use of 1 CP. And I took the other one, but not enough to bracket me. He went ahead and charged that boy, realizing, however, at the last second that he should probably kill the one that had a melee weapon instead, and put all of his attacks into that knight who was at full health but couldn't quite withstand the Custodes charge. He popped that one, and then I was actually able to do a single wound by kicking him with the knight that he had shot before. For my turn 1, I positioned the 3 remaining knights on that flank that were still able to shoot, in such a way that they could shoot at his other bike squad to try to take them out. I picked them up entirely, which hopefully 3 knights should do, right? And then I actually managed to kill 2 of the ones that were in melee with my other knight by just shooting into combat and rolling pretty well. The rest of that turn was just moving into position and putting up some banners with my infantry. His turn 2 did not go very well for him. He peeked out his tank, took some shots at a knight, and did almost nothing. His bike captain charged the flamers inside of the building and didn't manage to pick up the squad. He killed 3 of them, which is pretty good for a single guy, but it wasn't all of them. His remaining biker that was still in combat with my knight used a cool stratagem that got him an extra 2 attacks for having his friends brutally murdered in front of him, and he managed to bracket the Dread Knight. However, on my turn, I killed the shield captain, his last biker, and his tank. Turns out Chaos Knights have a lot of firepower. My second squad of Flamers deep struck behind his lines and picked up a unit of 3 Custodes pretty handily. From there, it was basically cleanup and scoring time. I wasn't able to kill his Sisters of Silence before my turn 3 psychic phase, so he managed to deny one of my warp rituals, which cost me a couple points. His Dreadnought managed to pick up my deep striking knight, but was killed right afterwards in my next shooting phase. My opponent was a great dude, and I'd gladly play him again. If he had rolled hot on his Alpha Strikes, probably would have been an entirely different game. Round 2 was 98-29 versus Goffs. I took Assassinate, Ruthless Tyranny, and no prisoners. I hid everything out of line of sight from his mech guns just in case he got turn 1, because, orcs can spike and blow some stuff up. I reserved 1 unit of Flamers and the Deep Striking Knight again. This game had the potential to be very close if I hadn't gone first and popped off, but I sure did. I used Tormented Wrath to give myself exploding 6s against one of his trucks, because I just could not risk those truck boys getting to me and just blowing stuff up. I managed to kill it with only using 2 knights because of those sweet, sweet exploding 6s, and he lost 1 Mega Knob to the vehicle blowing up. The second truck was destroyed with 3 knights shooting at it and not using the stratagem, obviously. But he lost 2 Mega Knobs from the wreckage in that one, which was very, very good for me. Unfortunately for him, then it just kind of became a shooting fish in a barrel situation because my remaining knights killed off one more Mega Nob and shot some Havoc launchers at the Grots, killing a couple, and my Flamers killed his entire commando unit off of one of his objectives. His turn 1, he called the wah, because what do you do at that point when your truck boys are dead? You wah. But basically, since I started so far back, all it did was move them up into my firing lines. He got good bits and took some pot shots at the knights with some mech guns, but he didn't even bracket one. On turn 2, I brought in my reserves, and I killed off all the Mega Nobs, both Squig Hog Rider squads, 2 units of Storm Boys, and a unit of Boys. Then I admittedly messed up, and I forgot that Gazzy's a big boy, and I could have just shot him, even though his friends were around him, so a full health Gazghoul charged in and popped a knight, just very little effort on his part. However, my next turn, I killed him, because my knight exploded, dealing 2 mortals to him in that phase. Then in my psychic phase, the little Herald did another 2. I shot him for 4, and Abaddon charged in and beheaded him for his last 4. Without the War Boss, the Green Tide fell into disarray, and I maxed Ruthless Tyranny and no prisoners. Round 3 was 74-46 versus Demons. It was on Data Scry Salvage. Ruthless Tyranny, Grind Them Down, and Assassination were my secondaries. This one was a lot tougher than the others. I could tell right away from how he deployed that it was going to be difficult. He put his Be'lakor in the very, very far corner so that no matter what, no matter where I was, the only thing I could shoot him with was my autocannon knights. So that made him nigh invincible. I only managed to get 2 wounds on Be'lakor between turns 1 and 2. So since they were damaged 3 weapons, he dropped them to 2. So I dealt 4 wounds total, and then he wound up healing with by getting 5 on the Warp Storm table. I dealt a lot more wounds to my own knights, using their Demonic Surge to try to get that +1 to wound to cancel out his -1 to wound. But at least on my first turn, I killed a squad of Nurglings. However, he intended for me to kill them by putting them up to move block me so I couldn't jump on the objectives right away. Which is what he did on his turn 1. He moved 2 chariots onto 2 different objectives, and then he ran his Skull Taker onto a 3rd. However, that just began the mass carnage of just everybody who goes on an objective dies. I killed both chariots and his Skull Taker on my turn, leaving 2 knights on 2 different objectives and a squad of flamers on the 3rd. On his turn, he teleported Be'lakor to one flank, summoning 3 Beasts of Nurgle. Summoning, but, he put them in reserves. And then he deep struck 12 flamers and just entirely obliterated one of the knights on the left flank. He thought he was going to need all 12. He only needed 6. He rolled pretty dang well. The Dark Master himself was terrified of my Knight's Dread Aura and failed his charge, which was pretty funny to see. And honestly, that probably sealed the game for me, because I was then able to just shoot him with everything next turn. So on my turn 3, I brought in my reserves, deep striking my knight into his backfield to try to charge his Fluxmaster, the chariot hero. Failed that charge, but it's fine. I killed 1 full squad of flamers and 4 out of 6 from the second squad. I shot into Be'lakor with everything else except for what went into the flamers, and I put him down to his middle bracket. And then I tried to charge with my deep striking stalker, and he utterly failed, was just kind of hanging out in his backfield, just like, what do I do now, Dad? Abaddon charged the Beast of Nurgle and killed 1, did quite a few wounds to the second one, but it didn't matter because he healed up. But he took a couple mortals for his trouble, which wasn't great, but it happens. On his turn, he fell back from Abaddon with the beasts, not wanting to tangle with someone who has the blessings of all the gods. And he moved them around to support his Demon Prince on the other flank. He deep struck Scarbrand 3 inches away from my knight in his deployment zone, and let's just say that stalker went night-night. There was no way he was standing up to Scarbrand. Be'lakor charged a knight who had enough CP where I burned an Overwatch, and I actually brought him down to his last bracket with that Overwatch. The Demon Prince charged my Mark of the Dread Knight, who, although exploded, the Dark Gods granted him a second chance when I used Beseech the Dark Gods. My next turn, I got Be'lakor down to 1 wound with the first knight. And then I proceeded to shoot the rest of my army into him and watched as my opponent passed over 20 invulnerable saves in a row. I even charged in with the 1 knight over there, not a combat knight, but still, I just needed to do a wound. And I did a wound. And he passed that one too. However, I used Spiteful Demise when he when he killed my knight to force it to blow up, dealing the last wound to Be'lakor. Turn 4 was the only time I actually scored 12 on primary, as my opponent used the last of his forces to clear me off the middle objectives on his turn 4. We ended the game with him having Scarbrand and 2 Flamers alive, and I had 2 very hurt knights, 2 full health knights, and my trusty blues, who just hid the whole time. It was an absolute bloodbath on both sides and a great way to end day 1. Day 2 started with my first loss, 55-84 versus Tyranids on Abandoned Sanctuaries. I took Ruthless Tyranny, Bring It Down, and no prisoners. Honestly, this probably could have been closer. I don't know if I end up winning, but it certainly should have been closer. But I got into my own head about being undefeated day 1 and being out of my depth on day 2. And not advisable. The figuring you're going to lose turns out to negatively affect your gameplay. Who would have thought? I completely messed up terrain placement. I wasn't paying as close of attention as I should have, and allowed him to get clear line of sight onto some of my knights from his Tyrant effects. D6 plus 4 is a hell of a damage profile against 12 wound models. He buffed and moved his Termagants into the secondary objective, completely killed one of my knight, and put the other one into bottom bracket. If I'd placed the terrain better, I probably wouldn't have taken any shots at all. I put the giant terrain piece in the middle to try to block his terrain deployment, but it left the line of sight open. On my turn 1, I moved up my Flamers in the range of his Termagants. I was super excited to finally be able to use the strat for maximum number of shots. For that one, you have to have 11 or more enemy models in the unit to get it, and it was the first time I'd ever been able to. So I just maximum shot with my Flamers. He had a 5-up Invul and a 5-up Feel No Pain, but I put him on like 34 wounds, if I remember correctly. He lost 6. Unfortunately, my opponent just rolled like, I don't even know, the god of luck, let's say, and only 6 Termagants died. I managed to kill a Tyrannofex with my Meltas, which felt good, and I thought maybe I have a chance now, but then I shot all my chain cannons into the Termagants, and again, he rolled very well, and I didn't kill very many of them. His turn 2, he popped another knight with his Tyrannofex, the one remaining, and then his Hive Tyrant with the wings dove in, popped another knight, and overran away. I am glad that that's not a thing they can do anymore. But he also managed to kill one with his Zoanthropes, because he had 2 squads of them, so that's a lot of mortal wounds. He had 75% of the board at this point, and I was down half my knights. I needed a Hail Mary, and honestly, it almost came to me. I deep struck in my reserves and brought the Termagants down to 10 of them so that I could shoot Big Mama, since they're no longer bodyguarding her. And I tore into her with the Meltas, and she passed a bunch of saves because she was on the Zoanthrope Invul. I got her to mid-bracket, which is at least something, but I feel like I should have gotten through more wounds. But, you know, it's a game of dice, right? If I did kill her, I had a chance. Maybe not a good one, but a chance. On his turn, his Hive Tyrant dove in again and psychicked a wounded knight to death, and then tried to charge down Abaddon with a 6-inch charge. Failed the charge. Failed the reroll charge. So at least I got my Pyrrhic, moral, whatever you want to call that victory, but on my turn, I got to charge Abaddon into his Reaper of Obliterax Tyrant and kill it off. I also managed to finish off the Tervigon, but not till after she popped a knight and a half. He had her with the ability to reroll pretty much everything, and with damage 2d3, pretty good against knights. He also managed to get a 6 on his advance for the warriors, and by doing so was able to advance and charge them into a knight and kill it. Literally, he had to roll a 6 on that, or I guess higher on his charge to get it, but either way, my Deep Striking Knight, boom, blew up. He also murdered my Defenseless Herald, who didn't do anything to him. And he put Abaddon down to 6 wounds. So at the end of the game, I had Abaddon at 3 wounds, who stood atop the abandoned sanctuary, granting me all the bonus points for that, which is funny because actually at the start of the game, he misspoke and said at the end of the game, I get 5 points for having the abandoned sanctuaries, and then it actually wound up happening. But however, he still had a Tyrannifex, 4 Zoes, 10 Gargoyles, 5 Warriors, 3 Tyrant Guard, 3 Biovores, and probably a Partridge in a Pear Tree, too. So Abaddon called his losses, dipped out, and started to regret allying with the Iron Warriors that day. That was a pretty brutal loss, but my opponent was super fun, and I'd gladly play him again. Round 4, 56 versus 90 to Custodes, loss number 2. This was on Conversion. I took Ruthless Tyranny, Bring It Down, and Warp Ritual. He had 5 Dreadnoughts and 3 Helverin. It was absolutely my kind of list. It was kind of like a weird nightmare, basically. So we both wanted to take this picture at turn 1, but we both forgot. So this is, turn 2. So I definitely was less than excited after losing that last round so badly, and I kind of messed up terrain again. So that's something that I really need to work on, is just making terrain second nature, so that even if I'm feeling bad about a loss or, I don't know, sick or something, I can just play the terrain and not horribly mess up. But I kind of got bailed out turn 1 because he got turn 1 on me. He shot at my knights that he could see because I messed up terrain, but he only killed 1. He managed to bracket another one, even though I gave it the Diabolic Bulwark to give the 4-up invul. But I was pretty happy with only losing 1 knight to, he had his 3 Helverin knights and then all those dreadnoughts. And then on my turn 2, I destroyed completely 2 dreadnoughts and a knight. But then I whiffed when I charged my combat knight into his dread and just completely bounced. His dreadnought then punched back and blew him up. It was a bit embarrassing for the much taller, much larger combat knight to just do nothing. But, hey, he was feeling his chain cannon, but not his gauntlet that day. But then his turn 2 just got insane. So in addition to killing 1 on my turn from combat, he killed 4 more on that turn. Just everything he shot failed all his saves and just boom, blew up. It was insane. It was such a bloodbath that he lost his 3 vehicles on his previous turn and then he just killed all of mine. It was insane. Definitely wasn't expecting the game to kind of be over by turn 2. There was still a little bit of play to have, but man, pretty much everything was dead. I did manage to beseech the Dark Gods and bring back the 5th one that he killed, so technically he only killed 4 on turn 2, but only 3 wounds means I'm not shooting so hot. So at the end of that turn, start of turn 3 technically, I had 1 knight on 3 wounds, a fresh one that I just deep struck in, my flamers, and Abaddon. So basically it was up to Abaddon if I wanted any chance, and boy did he try. He picked up a dreadnought and a character that was their captain equivalent. I'm so bad with Custode names. And didn't take any wounds in return because he's just a boss. Between my crippled knight and my deep struck one, I managed to finish off the 3 wound dread, and Abaddon shooting killed the 2 wound knight. The blues also did a wound, but we're going to give the credit to Abaddon. My Herald Warp Ritualed for the 1 turn he'd be alive to do it, and accepted that he was dead next turn. I deep struck my flamers into his backline to try to, if I was lucky, take out one of his other knights, or at the very least bracket it. However, I'm not good at rolling 5s, and I got 3 wounds through, and he saved 1 of them, so I did 2 wounds to it. On his turn, he shot and stabbed Abaddon, who abandoned the field. He wasn't feeling it anymore. It just wasn't worth risking his life to fight a losing battle, aka he did the 9 wounds. The Custode swiftly cleaned up my few remaining units, and I was soundly defeated. I was bailed out with my terrible terrain placement on that turn 1, but then the Dark Guards thought, maybe this guy doesn't deserve it, and I just got blown up. It was a really fast game, that's for sure. I think I had more time between this round and the next than I did in my first round, with the lunch break included. Would have loved to run that back because it was a super fun list, and I'd love to see what happens if I don't just lose all of my army on turn 2. But even with that, it was a fun match. My opponent was a super cool dude, and I appreciate the bold move he made of just running everything mid. So round 6. Didn't even have time to take a picture, basically, because, again, I forgot. It was 100-10 versus Creations of Bile on the Scouring. I took Ruthless Tyranny, No Prisoners, and Banners. So I just want to preface this by saying it was round 6. Everyone was tired, and my opponent was a cool dude who maybe wasn't super versed in this matchup. He made a big mistake with his deployment, and he put his Black Ruin Terminators in the middle of the objective, touching terrain but not blocked, and then put all of his characters right behind them, intending to buff them on his first turn and then have the unkillable Termi Brick to move forward. However, I got turn 1. I did mortal wounds to all of my knights in order to buff one gun to cancel out that -1 to wound on the Black Rune boys. I spent 2 CP to do exploding 6s on that Terminator unit, and I killed the last Terminator unit, having 3 knights still remaining to shoot his characters. I shot into and killed his Master Possession and his Demon Prince, and I also did 3 wounds to Abaddon. He kind of looked at his army and asked if we could just talk the game out at that point, because there was no way he was coming back. I agree, there was no way he was coming back, and it's round 6. You've played enough Warhammer. You probably don't just let your opponent shooting gallery you to death. He didn't want to stick me with the 70 for conceding, though. So we just talked out the game. We're like, okay, I'm going to kill these things. How many points do I get for no prisoners? I'm going to put up banners, blah, blah, blah. And we figured out that I would end up with 100. And I was willing to give him more points, but he said he was just going to take 10. He wasn't even going to walk on objectives. He messed up and he didn't deserve any more. I don't necessarily agree with that, but that was his call. I really wish he got to play a real game. He was a super cool dude. I always appreciate another Chaos Boy. He even had an Iron Warriors Abaddon just like I did. So a kindred spirit, and I would love to run into him at another event where hopefully he puts his Terminators out of line of sight, and I can't do that in turn 1. Although, to be fair, I'm not going to have Abaddon in with Knights anymore, so he doesn't have to worry about that. Overall, super fun event, going 4-2. Very happy with it, especially because I only got 3 games to practice because I was painting the boys the whole month of January. Probably shouldn't do that again, but I'm 2 for 2 on LVOs with that, so we'll see what happens next year. I do need to stop getting into my own head about not quote-unquote deserving to be at these higher tables. We'll work on that, though. I've only been doing this tournament thing for a year. But hey, the more high-level games I can get, the better my chances of not getting into my own head. So I've got to start bothering some of the more professional, quote-unquote, players in my area for games so they can kick my butt repeatedly, and I just get used to that craziness. But overall, LVO, amazing as always, and I'm happy to go back next year and hopefully actually remember to bring my jersey this time. Hope everyone enjoyed this battle report, and take it easy.